Bartolomeo needs to be the next Straw Hat Pirate. After watching this week's episode, I have officially been won over by the rooster-headed barrier man. He's got a great design, he's incredibly hilarious, and his abilities are beyond useful. Thanks to him, both Luffy and Kyros are this much closer to putting their heels up Doflamingo's ass. It's also worth mentioning that this week's episode had some very good animation, artwork, and action scenes. And even though they were all over the place, my favorite scene from this week's episode was actually a joke involving Bartolomeo. Luffy ends up giving him this nickname, and he just flips the crap out. Now, we've already seen Bartolomeo react to all the other members of the Straw Hat Pirates and seeing Luffy, but this week, he takes it to this hilarious new level where in his mind, he is standing at the top of this mountain above the clouds, and he is in complete euphoric bliss. It's over the top, it's hilarious, and it's one of the few scenes that made me want Bartolomeo to be one of the new members of the Straw Hat Pirates. It must happen. Not to mention, he literally takes bullets for Luffy in this week's episode. That is some hardcore bodyguard shit. I also really love the scene where Rebecca returns to the flower fields, which at first is very nostalgic and it feels like coming home. It's just a very nice, heartwarming scene. That is until Diamante just sort of pops up out of nowhere and is getting ready to chop her damn head off. But the action highlight of this week's episode is the battle between Fujitora and Sabo, which continues to escalate and get ridiculous, and they both have some amazing attacks. First up is Sabo, who does this amazing kick, and I love the way they animate his movement. It's very similar to Smoker, where like the bottom half of his torso is actually made up of fire. He's swirling around, and he does this one kick move, which literally creates a giant mushroom cloud of fire, just destroying everything around it. And then Fujitora just decides to up the ante a little bit with his gravity blade and uses this technique known as the Raging Tiger, which is basically just this big wind blast, but it just demolishes every building around them. And these guys are just amazing. Their battle just continues to get crazier and crazier. They're just as destructive as the giant birdcage that they're captured in. The episode ends in classic fashion where we get to go around to all the different parts of the battlefield. I thought it was really funny just seeing Frankie and Senor Pink just spinning around breakdancing. That was pretty random. Otherwise, just more of the big events which are getting ready to go down in the rest of the arc. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of One Piece? This animation and artwork needs to be in every single episode. I know it's not in the budget, but it just needs to be there. This week's episode looked good from beginning to end. Opening up with all the Rebecca scenes, her in the flower field. It was definitely a little fan servicey, especially one shot, and I think you know the one I'm talking about. It was actually the one that was in the preview from last week's episode. It's definitely here in full glory. Otherwise, the appearance of Diamante was very creepy and ominous with all of the flower petals just going in the wind. That was your first indication that this week's episode was going to look really good, and it really just went crazy with Fujitora and Sabo, which looked really good. And I like how the first episode when they were battling, it kind of looked okay. The second episode they were fighting, alright, we're looking better. And then this one just goes crazy with explosions, and when he pulls out the sword, just all the destruction from the gravity, just creating like this big wave of destruction around him. It's very Dragon Ball Z-esque, but I definitely like that a lot. Not to be outdone, even Luffy himself gets a few nice shots in this week's episode, and Nico Robin is also really impressive at the very end of this week's episode when she starts summoning her giant hands and smacking around the nutcrackers and getting ready to fight against Gladius. And Kyros continues to impress. Again, the guy has like no powers, no devil fruit powers, he's missing a leg, but he's still outrunning Luffy. The guy is freaking awesome. On the technical side of things, this week's episode looked really good. It was definitely above average in terms of One Piece animation, and I really wish every episode could be like this, but it's just not in the cards. They just don't have the budget for it, but this was still a nice episode, and one that I think a lot of people are going to remember. There were a lot of really big scenes and some nice setup, some really good action, tons of humor, great voice acting, some really good music in this week's episode. Everything just worked this week. This was a really classic episode of One Piece, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I just had a lot of fun watching this one, and you should definitely check it out if you're a One Piece fan. Whether you're reading a manga or you're continuing to watch the anime, check this one out. It's pretty freaking good. So I loved this episode quite a bit, but what about you guys? What did you think about this week's episode of One Piece? Did you have any favorite scenes, favorite action scenes? I really want Bartolomeo to be the next Straw Hat Pirate, but what about you? Do you have a brand new candidate? And what do you want to see from the rest of the Dressrosa arc? Please tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to like it, share it with all of your friends, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way you can see all of our latest anime and manga reviews as they are released. You can also follow us on social media. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!